Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Blockchain Startup Show. I'm Avan Dabash. In today's episode, we have a platform that aims to revolutionize governance in the blockchain space. As the blockchain industry continues to evolve, the need for effective governance mechanisms becomes crucial. Joining us today is a special guest representing Polkassembly, a platform that serves as the most unified platform to discuss and vote on governance proposals, motions, and referendums. Polkassembly aims to provide a transparent and inclusive space for blockchain communities to participate in the decision-making processes with its unique features and a user-friendly interface. Joining in today is the co-founder of Polkassembly, Jaskirat Singh. Jaski, welcome to the show. Now, to start off with, what about your journey then, Jaski? Tell us a little bit more about it in Web3 so far.
Hey, hi. Thank you for having me on the show. My Web3 journey, like a lot of people, has been very interesting. It's through reference, right? People who were in the space asked me to come join and explore. So I was back then working at a Web2 startup, working 12, 13 hours a day, and parallelly I was introduced to DAOs. And I started writing articles, doing some data research, and that's where I entered Web3. I got deeper into DAOs and started working like 4 hours every day in DAOs, apart from working at a regular Web2 startup, and got closer to founders, figured out what was happening in the space, and that got me pretty excited.
Well, that's interesting. Can you also share with us some information about the genesis of Polkassembly, how exactly it's transformed into the larger version of the House of Commons?
That's a very interesting story. So Polkassembly started inside Parity. Now, Parity is the company that was behind development of Polkadot, which is one of the top 5 blockchains out there in the space. So we started as a small project inside Parity. It was a governance tooling that we were essentially trying to build, and Polkadot is known for its governance processes. So we started as a small project. We separated out of Parity back in 2020. From 2020 to 2023, we kept working as a very small team, just focused on developing one thing as a platform, which was Polkassembly. As Polkassembly grew, we realized that there were a lot of other gaps in the space that we have to take care of. Right, there were opportunities that presented and clear problems that we felt could be solved and should be solved, and there was nobody else doing it. That's where we started developing more products, and then eventually binding all our products together became the vision of House of Commons, which maybe we can dive down deeper in our today's questions.
And do shed some light on the kind of traction that you've witnessed so far.
We are one of the top projects in the Polkadot ecosystem. We have more than 60 blockchains who work as partners with us, who've been using the platform to run their governance. All inclusive, we have more than 60K plus MAU. We've had more than 100K plus users onboarded to the platform with 60K plus and using it monthly. We've had partners using our API calls, giving us more than 30 million plus API calls every month. And we've processed more than 300 million worth of grants via our platform, right? And yeah, we've had 5,000 plus discussions. So that's overall what we've achieved in the past 3 years.
So how do you think, Jaski, that the governance in Web3 is different from that of Web2?
That's a very interesting question, to be honest. So governance in Web2, I'm not sure if that's the right question, because when we talk about governance, it's about the traditional governance structures that we live in, right? And this has evolved from so many years, from tribes and kingdoms to where we are today. And that includes a subset of corporate governance when we say Web2 governance, but it's mostly a human nature and problem that we see in our countries, right? We live in everywhere we live, there is governance structures established, from panchayat to state assemblies to national democracies, right? How is Web3 governance different? Now, what happens in Web2 governance, or the real world governance, I say, is that we elect leaders once every 5 years. We vote people to power more than about how they portray themselves rather than their skill set or what are they actually going to do once in office. Once we elect people to power, we hardly have any communication with them, and we have no idea what they're doing. So essentially, even if they're voting for things within the parliament, within their assembly, we have no idea what's happening. And there is no easy way for a common citizen to remove their elected people. How's Web3 governance different? Web3 governance is extremely agile, saying that, hey, if you've voted somebody to power, essentially saying that you've delegated your voting power to someone, saying that I allow you to take decisions on my behalf, you can change that. You can essentially track on blockchain what that person's doing, what proposals they're voting on, how are they taking decisions or even discussions in public forum. And you can communicate with them, question what they're doing. And if you still feel that you're not aligned with them, change that. Immediately undelegate, take the power back to you. This is something that's very important that does not happen in the real world, is you get the power back to you to say, hey, these are my votes, these are my tokens that I want to use my voting power. I do not find any delegate worthy of my voting power. So you take that away. Or if you find somebody else, you give that. The second beauty is that you can delegate to people for specific things. Today, in the real world, when we delegate our voting power to someone, we have no idea what they're going to vote on. So if I am voting my power to somebody for, let's say in the Web3 world, we're talking about products for product. They're supposed to just vote on product. They have no idea probably how tech works. They have no idea how businesses work. So this becomes a very important factor where you can delegate your voting power to people for specific things, track, communicate, and be able to make them stand accountable for whatever they're voting on.
So, can you explain the importance and the concept of contributor identity?
Yeah, so contributors is something that we really appreciate in Web3, and especially at Polkassembly. I mean, contributors essentially mean somebody who's trying to contribute something to development of anything or growth of anything, and it can be in any way, right? It happens all the time in Web2, like anything, like you, me, or anybody else working for an organization is essentially a contributor. In Web2, we call them as resources, a word that I'm usually not very fond of. I feel everyone is a contributor rather than a resource. First, it brings in a more personal connection. But again, coming back to contributors and Web3, essentially the idea is that if you are doing anything for the growth of a protocol, and anything means anything across the tangent. So if you're an open source developer, you are a contributor. If you're solving quests and bounties, you're a contributor. If you're helping in social media growth of the protocol, great, you're a contributor. You're essentially doing various things across the tangent from legal, product, business, design, community, social to tech. Everything that you're doing, you're a contributor. And one beautiful element is platforms like Gitcoin, which allow you to contribute money to people who are making contributions. So essentially saying that, hey, if you're doing an open source contribution, here's a grant that I want to give you for the great work you've done. So you, when you're donating money, are also a contributor. So the idea is that in Web3, especially when people have anonymous identities, or even if they don't, we want them to be able to create their identity in the space, essentially be able to be recognized if they choose to for the work that they've done across the board. So no matter which protocol they go, no matter which project they work with or what they do, their identity is formed in a digital uh, identity, right? So essentially saying that all your contributions are on the blockchain, that you can track, that you can show and prove that you're the one who's done it. And this essentially helps you grow much faster in the ecosystem, and people look at you as a great contributor, not a resource.
So, how do products within the House of Commons tie in with each other and create a holistic platform of management for DAOs?
Coming to DAOs, I think I'm not sure if a lot of your listeners would be accustomed to the word DAO, right? DAOs are essentially organizations but with more distributed decision-making power, running more autonomously, saying that a lot of functions are automated and you don't need central hierarchies to control everything. And when it comes to Web3, DAOs are a very prominent thing. Most organizations, once they've reached a critical threshold, turn themselves into a DAO, which opens a space for a lot of people to start coming together and contributing. With DAOs, just like any traditional organization, there are two primary things that come into play, right? First is, how does the DAO work? That's where governance comes in. So essentially saying that, hey, these are the technical parameters that we need to change. This is how we probably need to use the money that we have within the DAO treasury, saying allocate XP, let's say $10,000 to somebody building something on top of the platform, or use $15,000 for marketing. So things like these are run via governance in a DAO. And that's where Polkassembly comes in. Polkassembly is an on-chain governance platform saying that you come, if you hold tokens for any protocol, let's say if you are a member of Polkadot, you hold DOT, which is the token of Polkadot. You come and vote on proposals, discuss, if somebody goes on and creates a proposal asking for funds, you go and discuss if it makes sense. You go through their budget and evaluate things. So you essentially scrutinize the proposal, share your opinions, and when it's the time, you vote. Your vote goes on the blockchain and has real implications, saying that if your vote passes, the proposal gets executed automatically. So there's no third party control saying that no matter what the decision, we're not going to execute. Happens a lot in the real world. But coming back to the products, Polkassembly is an on-chain governance product. Town Hall, which is a new product that we're building, is an off-chain governance product. Why off-chain when we say that on-chain is much better? Essentially, not every decision can be a decision that needs a blockchain change or needs involvement from the blockchain. It's more about, hey, should we establish a light in the community? This is a off-chain discussion that does not require any action on the blockchain. So for a wide range of experimental discussions like these, that's where Town Hall comes in. And Town Hall also very interestingly evolves into a Web2 domain that probably will keep for after the launch.
Well, we certainly covered some fascinating ground so far. In the next segment, get ready to dive deeper into the world of blockchain governance with Jaskeet, the co-founder of Polkassembly. Welcome back to the Blockchain Startup Show. We're in conversation with Jaskeet Singh, who is discussing Polkassembly and its groundbreaking approach to blockchain governance. What is your long-term vision with the House of Commons?
We all aim a little too high. I think that's something that I've seen very common with founders, that we have very ambitious visions, and we at House of Commons too. We essentially see House of Commons and the governance platforms, especially making a dent in how Web2 companies or traditional worlds are organized. So we are already speaking to a couple of people who want to explore the idea of Web3 governance, essentially saying a more decentralized decision making, a more distributed power, and a more collaborative environment. The world is moving in this direction, and we feel House of Commons and our platforms will play a very significant role in transitioning of a world where everything is centrally controlled by a few organizations to a more distributed, inclusive world that we live in.
Okay. And Jaskeet, how has your background in venture capital helped you as a founder?
Most people in Web3 enter Web3 via venture capital. It's, I think, easier to navigate the space because this space is extremely new and it does not give you a lot of depth or understanding if you're trying to dive into one topic immediately because of lack of resources and a couple of other reasons. So venture capital really helped me do that. When I joined Web3 officially after having worked with a couple of DAOs, VC gave me an opportunity to work very closely with founders, see a broad domain of problems and issues that existed, and some of them being tried to solve by some amazing founders out there in the space. And it gave me access to a lot of startups that were doing some really good work, and I could closely work with them. So having hands-on experience in execution really helped me navigate what I wanted to develop as a founder. And it gave a lot of other advantages around, having a broad idea of the space, getting to know from a broader lens of regulations, and having a lot of time to research. I think research, if you're somebody who's trying to get into Web3, having a research mindset is really, really important, and probably working with a VC venture capital firm can help you establish that much better.
And what suggestions would you give a developer who's actually trying to build a project in Web3? What would be your advice?
I usually don't advise developers a lot. They're pretty smart themselves. But if I had to address a wider audience of developers or people who are trying to get into Web3, first, don't be overwhelmed. Right. I know it's a lot when you're getting into Web3. There's information being bombarded at you from so many places, too much technical data that you need to process and understand to be able to make sense of the space that you're getting into. But trust me, there are a lot of people who are out there very willing to help. So I'm sure if there's anybody in Web3 that you reach out to, we're more than enthusiastic to have you come join us in Web3. So we'd be more than happy to help you. Regulations is something that people are often worried about. Regulations will take their own time. I think government needs it time to figure out the right way to regulate this new asset class that has emerged, right? And everybody in the industry is very willingly open to coordinate with the government and work closely on that front. So regulations will come around. Most Web3 companies that are in India or across the world are working in the most compliant manner that they can. So I don't think regulation as a job perspective should worry anybody. It's an interesting domain. It's a emerging field, right? So if you're not working in AI and crypto, what are you doing? So jump into Web3. We are all here to help you.
Noted. And what are you most now looking forward to in the Web3 space over the next few years?
I am looking forward to the end of a bear market. I don't know what that means, or I don't know when that comes. But just jokes aside, I really look forward to some new emerging narratives and technologies that are coming along. So after 3, 4 years of work, CK technology is finally taking some shape. Are we finally there? Probably not. There's a lot more work that needs to be done. But finally, ZK has started to pick up where we see zero knowledge proofs essentially evolving and creating this private layer, because people often complain that blockchains are extremely transparent. So zero knowledge aims to change that. So there's a lot of work happening in that domain with ZK stocks, ZK stocks, etc. I do really find social very interesting. So we've seen a huge change in what's happening at Twitter, what Jack Dorsey himself is trying to do, and a couple of very interesting Web3 projects, for namesake, Lens Protocol or Farcaster, are doing some very interesting thing in this domain. So I see social becoming a very important sector. Gaming being next. There are a couple of games that have been developing for the past 3 years or more, and they're finally ready to be shipped in the next 6 to 8 months. I'm really excited to see what's going to come there. And coming to what we do, I think governance is going to take a very interesting shape in the next couple of months and years, especially with regulations tightening. More and more protocols will be forced to decentralize and decentralize better. And at the core of decentralization, governance will become a very important theme across the board. So I think broadly, those are segments that I'm really excited about.
That sounds very interesting. Now, the blockchain space is certainly very rapidly evolving, Jasky. So, how does Polkassembly actually plan to adapt and incorporate new features or improvements to enhance their governance capabilities?
The space is rapidly evolving. I think that's the beauty of Web3 space, that everything changes so quickly. I mean, within a week, you see something new happening every day. So what are we doing as Polkassembly or as House of Commons to adapt to the change and plan for the future? There are a couple of very interesting things. So we understand that private voting is very important. So even in real world, I mean, when we vote, the ballots are private and nobody is ideally supposed to know what I voted on. Web3 as of today is different. So essentially all your votes are on the blockchain. So if somebody knows your wallet address, they know what you practically voted on. That can lead to some issues. So private voting with CK technology is something that we're really looking forward to. Second, as I mentioned, I think in one of the earlier conversations today, was the idea around identity and accountability. So we take this theme very seriously in Web3, where as governance becomes a very important theme, we understand that there will be a huge importance laid down on accountability, especially when you're having delegates that you're giving your voting power to. You want them to be able to be accountable. Firstly, you want them to be accountable. Second, you want to have a more established channel of identifying the right people to delegate your votes to. So creating this identity layer where all the people who aspire to be delegates can come create their identity on the blockchain, verify their data so that people know that it's true and it's nothing fake, right? And be able to represent themselves as somebody who deserve to be given voting power. Incentives is another theme that we closely look at because we feel that nobody would be willing to vote and go through hundreds of proposals every day if their incentives are not aligned clearly. So it's incentives that we are working on very closely with a couple of important players in this entire space to figure out how we can incentivize the delegates and people to act in the correct direction. And accountability is a very important theme that we take care of internally and externally as well as a project. So we want to make sure that whoever is voting, participating, or doing anything in the Web3 space is held accountable for their actions. So saying that if a delegate is taking any or practicing anything that's against the community's will or against the protocol, there should be consequences that are associated to it. And people should know. So essentially, people should be able to track everything about every activity that a delegate is doing. So yeah, broadly, we see accountability, incentivization being the primary themes of what we are trying to do, and private voting.
Fascinating insights, Jasky. Thank you so much for joining in. It's very clear that Polkassembly is leading the way in providing a unified platform for blockchain governance. Good to have you on board. Thanks so much for sharing with us all that knowledge.